The data model did exactly what it was designed to do, but yet it still crossed a line. And that's the nightmare version of this longitudinal view that makes me nervous.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday, I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, we're talking about the longitudinal view, the idea that AI can finally connect the dots across a student's full academic, financial, and personal journey. It's exciting, it's complicated, and it forces us to rethink everything from privacy to pedagogy. And we've got the perfect guest to take us there. I'm excited to welcome Dave Weil back to Higher Ed Pulse. Dave is the SVP for Strategic Services and Initiatives and CIO at Ithaca College. He oversees human resources, IT, analytics, and AI, and leads institution-wide strategic initiatives. A recipient of the 2024 EDUCAUSE Leadership Award, he's a nationally recognized voice on leadership, digital transformation, and the evolving role of technology in higher education. Dave, welcome back to the Pulse. And before we talk about anything relevant, I got to ask the most important question of the day. Are you team real tree or team fake tree?
Real tree all the way.
Okay.
I mean, it's got to have that fresh scent. And in fact, the family, we went out last weekend and we went tree hunting, and it's always this great thing. My son just got married last June, and his wife was along for the journey, and it was her first tree safari. And so, absolutely, team real tree.
We're on opposite sides of the spectrum here on this one, Dave. I'm team fake tree with just as much passion, I gotta say.
Right. That's good. That's good. Well,
there's just something very convenient, and I'm an Enneagram 3. I like efficiency. The fact that I can just pull it out of a box and put it up.
Yeah. But
I'm all for
fresh
it.
pine scent and just
That's
the
what candles are for.
excursion. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think growing up, right? Sometimes I think that impacts what team you're on. And growing up, I was always in a home with a fake tree. And I was told it's because I was allergic to real trees, but I think it's because my mom just wanted a fake tree.
Right.
Well, we're not here to debate the holidays. We are here to talk about this fantastic article that you published for EDUCAUSE, and that caused me to reach out to you. Y'all, it's linked in the show notes. In this article, Dave argues that AI's real potential isn't in the flashy tools or point solutions that we've all been piloting. It's in something a lot bigger, the ability to really finally stitch together the thousands of tiny signals that students generate across their entire academic, financial, and personal lives. And when we connect those dots, we don't just get better dashboards, we get a fundamentally different view of the student. That's the longitudinal view that Dave argues for, this shift from episodic and transactional support to a more continuous and contextual understanding of the person. So instead of asking, did a student miss their advising appointment? We can ask, what's the pattern behind it? And what do they actually need right now? That shift opens the door to new possibilities, earlier interventions, more equitable experiences, smarter resource allocation, all these things. But there's also new risks introduced as well. What should be connected? What shouldn't? And who gets to make those decisions? Y'all, this isn't a technology story. It's a governance story, a culture story, and I think most importantly, a human story. It's forcing campus leaders to confront the limits of our systems, the fragmentation of our data, and assumptions that are baked into existing policies and workflows. So today, Dave and I are going to dig into what it will take for a college to design responsibly for this longitudinal future, one that is hopefully more supportive and more precise for the student. But I'll give you the caveat before I bring Dave back in. Neither of us have all the answers to these questions, but we are here to really explore what those answers could look like. So Dave, your EDUCAUSE article, I think, planted a nice flag that, AI's real promise in higher ed isn't the flashy tool, but the ability to build this longitudinal understanding of every single student's journey. So let's start there. When you use that phrase, longitudinal view, what does that actually mean to you in practice?
Well, I mean, think about it. A student or any of us, we're not just the product of that one interaction that we have. If you go to the dining hall, that's an interaction, but it's influenced in part by what happened just before you went to the dining hall. Or if you are doing great in class, well, that can carry over into some other things. And I think that, so many of our systems and services really take this siloed view or this view of this transactional interaction. But our students' experience at our institutions is really about that whole journey. It's about all of their interactions that they have and the totality of that. And I think for years, we talked about creating these great data environments, these dashboards and this information, but we still have struggled a little bit in connecting the dots. And I think this is where AI really starts to offer us the opportunity to connect dots in ways that we haven't before. So a student that may be struggling a little bit, an advisor might be able to now know that, well, they're on the sports team, they're on the softball team, and the softball team had, a couple of bad games. And then also maybe the student had some problems with their dorm room and something was going on there. So you can start to really understand that. And then once we understand that, that can inform and help reduce that friction that students can encounter.
So you said everyone in higher ed's least favorite word, silo. But the word that, I think whether you're on campus for one day or 10,000 days, you've heard the word and the silos exist, and the real challenges with these point solutions that you reference and the data silos, right? It really does cause the barrier to doing what you're describing. So from your lens as a CIO, and someone who's been in this industry for a long time, what do you think that first step is that institutions need to take in order to move in the direction that you're describing?
Well, a lot of it is really about the data. And I think the data is so important that we have access to it. And one of the things that I am a little concerned about at times is that, as we go with more software as a solution, SaaS solutions and things like that, sometimes it makes it a little harder to get access to that data. And so at Ithaca College, a few years ago, we merged our analytics and our IT organizations. And I really think that sort of set the foundation for a lot of it. But you have to have the information. You have to have access to it. And I think we have to be very aware of that as we look to architect our solutions.
Yeah, I think this is the messiest part of all this, because most campuses do not have clean data or shared governance or systems that speak to each other. Just a dozen point solutions that don't speak to each other. So structurally and architecturally, there has to be some changes. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what you've implemented at Ithaca?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, we pulled together those groups. And I think that was a major piece, because not only now do we have the people that can work with the data, but they also know what questions are being asked of the data. And I think those questions then go and lead to, well, what AI solutions, or how do we want to think about the AI solutions? So I think that's really important. As you've referred to a few times, this idea of data governance really comes into play as well.
In these large matrixed organizations that we call universities, the data is definitely the hardest part to all of this. And this all makes me think about that Target case study that I bet a lot of us learned in grad school. I don't know, Dave, if you're familiar with it, but or listeners, if you're not familiar with this, Target many years ago used their data models and essentially figured out that a girl was pregnant because of this very random combination of things that she purchased. And then they mailed her family prenatal coupons before she had even told her parents. that she was pregnant. So, right. So there's an example of like, okay, the data model did exactly what it was designed to do, but yet it still crossed a line. And like, that's the nightmare version of this longitudinal view that makes me nervous. So who is owning the data within these institutions? Who's making the decisions, and who's ensuring that those ethical boundaries like are being upheld?
I think that is such an important issue and something that we don't have all the answers to. And one of the things that, we have as one of the core values at Ithaca is that we are about the human to human interactions. And so one of the ways that we are using these systems now, and at least for the foreseeable future, is to inform the people that are already charged with doing or taking these interventions or taking these actions, so that they have an opportunity to see the results and they can interpret them and they can say, wait, this is off or this doesn't make sense. So that's one way. Another way is just to be upfront about what are the connections that we're trying to make. So using your example, or let me back up. We also fully expect to have students to be able to go in and say, no, don't use this information about me. This is a piece I don't want to know. And we did an early version of this where we have this dashboard that advisors use. This is pre-AI, but it's the same concept where there were certain things, characteristics about the student. And the student could say, no, I don't want my advisor to know I'm a first generation student. Or no, I don't want my advisor to know this piece of information about me. And so they have agency with that. And I think we have to take a similar model here where we have to be able to tell the students, this is the data or this is what we know about you, and give them an opportunity where appropriate to say, yeah, this is not what I want. Now, the flip side of this, though, is the expectation that I think is increasingly growing that an institution will tell a student, oh, wait, no, don't take those 3 courses at the same time because we know that people that take all 3 of those courses at the same time usually don't do so well. And so, that's the other side of this, where there really is this expectation that the institutions that now have this information and these tools can proactively help guide towards success. And so it's really a fine line to draw between those two. I think, though, transparency is going to be critically important as we go forward with this.
Yeah, man, as you're describing that, I'm like, I'm back in those really tough semesters that I experienced in undergrad and grad and thinking like, gosh, I wish my institution would have been able to advise me to say, take these courses together or don't, based off of all the other things that were going on. I think that's something that's immediately a value add. But student affairs and enrollment versus academics versus IT, like you are in such a fortunate position with your portfolio where you get to oversee AI, IT, analytics, and HR. What a unique vantage point that you have. But could this become like a turf war in some ways, even if the students still retain some of the agency on what they can, co-author in this longitudinal story? Internally, do the politics start to become a big barrier?
Well, yes. And as I said in the article, I think there's 3 factors that are sort of limiting, or not limiting, but 3 factors that we need to address. One would be the technical architecture of this. Do we have access to the data? What are the various AI tools that we're looking at? So I think, that's the first. The second is, as I've mentioned, the data and how is our data organized there. But the third is not technical. It's not data. It is the institution. And it is saying that how do we work across the traditional institutional, I guess, silos, or we could say organizational structures if we don't want to use the S word there. And I think that that's also part of it. So, at Ithaca, I'm working very closely with the Vice President for Student Affairs and Campus Life. And we are leading an effort to do journey mapping, where we're going to look at the student journey from the time that they are thinking about Ithaca College until, they enroll and go through that. And through that journey mapping work, we will identify where are those friction points and where are the challenges. Then that journey mapping will inform conversations across all of the organizational units at the institution to say, okay, we're not doing a good handoff between this department and that department, or here's a place that students are really struggling or is causing problems, and here's also where we're doing well. Well, now that also is going to inform some of the work that we're doing as we look at opportunities to implement maybe some AI solutions and other tools to, again, help reduce the friction that they have across that. So it's as much a technology effort as it is a data effort, as it is a process, a process innovation effort. And I think you really have to look at it through those three lenses in order for it to be successful. And again, just reiterating what we said earlier, this is about improving the human to human opportunities and the experiences that they have. And some of it is a little bit like, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable, to your point about the target example and other things. And those are things that we need to work together to figure out, how do we make this less uncomfortable? Maybe we don't go down. Maybe, that's not an area we want to really connect the dots on. It's not appropriate. And that's okay. But here's an area that we feel a lot more comfortable with and have real value.
So let's create a fictitious scenario where the process has been innovated and an advisor gets an AI generated alert. Say a student's trending towards academic trouble. We know it's a female who's from out of state. She plays lacrosse and she's a junior, right? Just in this fictitious scenario, let's give her some data points. How do we make sure that the person who is getting that AI generated alert trusts it, understands the why behind it, and knows the right next steps?
Well, first of all, it's not like the alert is going to be sent out across the institution. Hey, Sally's experiencing that. No.
All 1,000 employees
that's
get
right,
that. No.
Right. No, it's like there's not going to be this giant dashboard. I mean,
Right.
We're laughing about it, but I think that's really, important to really emphasize. This doesn't change who needs to know this information. So today we have an academic success center. It's established. It works with students that are struggling. Today, they have different ways of learning about students that may benefit from the experience with the Academic Support Center. And this would be another way, not the only way, just another way to help inform them. And so I think that's important, that it's an enhancement. It'll still go to the people that are charged with that type of work. Again, not be broadcast widely, built-in controls for who has access and that. So, as institutions, we have a obligation to help our students be as successful as they can. And I really see it as a next step in that.
Yeah.
Certainly it can be misused, but.
This next question's a big one. And again, I think it's important to note that neither of us on this conversation truly have every single answer. But I do want to talk about this from an equity side of things too, because I think that's a really important lens to be considering. Longitudinal models certainly can help us spot issues earlier, but they could also codify them if the underlying data is biased. And that's a real concern within an organization built to educate. So how can what are your kind of initial thoughts on how an institution might design all of this responsibly so that we can help close gaps, not predict students into lower expectations?
Yeah, that is a really important question and issue. And I think, as we think about equity and being, you don't want to track somebody into a particular program just because the data is saying this. Again, and I recognize I'm repeating a little bit, but we're looking at this as a tool, not the be all end all to it. And so everything we're doing is still going to go to somebody this is their profession. They, understand the subtleties. They may look at some of this information and go, this doesn't make sense, or this, or maybe there are still other things that are not included in the data or in the, AI or the technology that need to factor into this. we have a tool that we've now been using for a year and a half that I've talked about before, which is with our eye care team. And this is a group of people that work with our students that are struggling a little bit. And that tool has been successful because it informs the eye care counselor before they meet with the student. But that's all it does, is it informs the counselor. So the counselor can then go in knowing some areas that they may want to explore with the student, but it doesn't provide all the answers. And that model, I think, really applies broadly across the institution and how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, if there's any takeaway here, it's keep the human in the loop. Pretty please.
Absolutely. And I think that, thank you for saying that, because I really do think that is a foundational piece of the way that Ithaca is approaching this.
So right now, a lot of schools are measuring AI off of efficiency wins, which certainly is nice, but that's not as transformative of what you're discussing today. So if there was an ROI metric that you put in front of your president or the board to showcase success in a longitudinal view model, what is that metric or outcome that kind of proves that this is worth an investment?
I think it's about retention. I really do. And I think that there's there's a financial aspect to that. Obviously, for every student we retain, that's, tuition revenue. But the more important one is about the student. And, probably the worst thing that can happen is a student not complete their degree program. They may have debt and other things that they've encountered and then to not get that degree. So I see this as, something that can really help with retention. And we know from the eye care example where the tool has allowed more human-to-human meetings between the counselors and the students as a result of the tool. It allowed for 150 additional meetings last academic year. That translates to, we believe we retained a number of students directly as a result of that, because we have other studies that show students have those human-to-human meetings with the counselors, they retain at a higher level. So again, we're optimistic that if we can take that and replicate that elsewhere where we can reduce the friction, provide better support, that it will have the retention impact.
Wow, that's incredible. And I completely agree with everything that you just said. So, hey, let's end on a future forward note. We get the architecture and the ethics and the culture right on all of this. And we're 5 years in the future and you're coming back on the pulse to talk about all the successes. What's the thing that, maybe feels unimaginable as we're recording this today, but you believe that longitudinal view could make possible 5 years from now?
I just think, that retention is just be something that, every student that wants to succeed can succeed, but also that the institution isn't getting in the way of the student being successful. We've reduced those pain points across their journey while they're interacting with us in all the myriad of ways that they do. And I think it's obtainable.
Yeah. And to that point, right, you retain the student, you graduate them, they're graduating happier, hopefully more successfully, with, now like this opportunity to take that longitudinal mindset into their alumni and donor journey, which is often my personal biggest complaint about many of our institutions, thanks to all the issues we've discussed today. So happy students equal happy alum, right? And success all around.
Absolutely. And I'd also want to add, and I think that students will feel that we are doing this in a responsible and an ethical way. And so if a student says, I don't want you to know anything about me, I just want to go to class and do my thing and come out and we'll go, okay, that's fine. And we won't. And, I think we have to really take that to heart as we build these solutions.
Yeah. Well, hey, what a great way to start to close out this year with a conversation like this. I think 2025 was a big year for AI in higher ed as we look back over the last 12 months and just the incredible increase in implementation and usage and comfortability with these tools. And, you know, it's exponential that how things are changing with AI and this technology. And that just opens up so many amazing possibilities for our institutions. Dave, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I really appreciate you inviting me back. You know, it's really an interesting time. We've only had 3 years since ChatGPT 3.5 came out, and it's just amazing what we've been able to do. And, you know, 3 years from now, as we're still debating real trees or artificial trees, you know,
AI trees.
That's right. That'll be, you know, we'll have the virtual trees behind us, but it's been great. Thank you, Mallory.
Incredible. Well, listeners, we only have one episode left in this calendar year, and it is going to be a mashup of some of my favorite and your most listened to episodes over the course of 2025. And interestingly enough, when we pulled those transcripts, quite a story emerges on what unfolded in AI in higher education this year. So look forward to that episode next week to close this year out. And with that, Dave, thanks again. We'll catch you soon. Happy holidays and bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.